Have you ever let a challenge or a difficult experience in your life start to define who you are and how you see yourself? Well, our guest today knows a thing or two about that, and she's now sharing her story in her best-selling book called New Again, in hopes of helping others find new perspective on life and the inevitable challenges that come along with it. At the peak of the recession, Andy Ptacek co-founded her marketing company. 10 years later, and a thriving business to boot, Andy was diagnosed with brain cancer and what her first doctor called inoperable brain cancer at just 32 years old with 2 little boys at home. Understandably, this rocked everything. First, in a scary way, but then in a grateful way. The journey was agonizing at times, and the perspective taught her that she was not damaged. The experience actually grew her self-awareness, her ability to love, her patience, her worldview, and especially her faith. She describes that the old Andy had grown into something new, something better. And she believes that we are all capable of this, even without a massively traumatic experience to shake us awake. I can't wait for you guys to hear this interview with my dear friend Andy, so let's get to it. Welcome back to the show. I'm excited about our interview today, although I say that for all of them. You guys should know this about me by this point. I'm pretty much excited about everything that I get to do on a daily basis. And what I love about this journey is that it has brought some of the most incredible people and women into my life. And our guest today is definitely one of them. So Andy, thanks so much for hanging out and for being here with us today. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much for having me. This is such a treat.
I know my my smile muscles already hurt just from like our short conversation before we turned on the microphones. And you and I have recently gotten connected. We both live in Phoenix. We both love to hike, and that's pretty much like a done deal as far as a new friendship in my life is someone who I can just call up and say, gosh, I need to get outside. Let's go hike. And we hiked last week, and there's so much that came up in our conversation that I was telling you, I wish I would have had a microphone on the mountain, although we would probably be panting a little bit more.
Yeah, there was a little of that.
And so much of your story that I know I relate to, and I feel like so many of the women in our community will as well. So I would love if you would actually just start with your business journey, because you started a business at a time that most people probably would have said, don't do it. And maybe you even had people tell you that. And so I'd actually love to hear that story before we get into the goods today.
Yes, absolutely. So I went to ASU and graduated from the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communication, fully intending on going into TV, being a producer. And I was really encouraged in that. I loved it. I loved the whole vibe of the newsroom and the hustle bustle of it. And being behind the scenes was always my gig, and I just really enjoyed it. So this is raw truth. It doesn't paint me in the best light. But when I was in college, I used a fake ID to get into a club. And that ruined. It gave me a misdemeanor. And it ruined my first job at Channel 3. I got hired, and then they called me back and they said, we have a record. I'm like, oh my gosh, I wasn't even drinking. But that was right after, the terrorist attacks, and false use of identification was a major thing. So I got that taken away, and I'm like, okay, I'll go into PR. And because that's the other side of TV, you pitch the stuff to the TV stations. And so I went into PR, and at first I was super excited, but the whole facade kind of weared off very quickly. I had this salary job. I was making less than somebody at In-N-Out Burger, and I was using my degree, but I was not fulfilled at all. My superiors expected so much. But I wasn't I don't know, I just wasn't jiving with the whole, like, what was my purpose here? What am I doing? Is this worth it? And I had this epiphany one day when I came home from work, and I was driving, 45 minutes to get to work in rush hour traffic and home. And when I would get home, my husband's a firefighter, so he would always be a good man and have my dinner started and on his days off. And he would have most times a margarita waiting for me because I needed to take the edge off every single day. So when I realized that I was drinking so much because I just wasn't satisfied, I was like, not that I didn't have a problem. But I was just like, to chill out, I have to complain about my day, and this isn't serving me. And when I was 6 months pregnant, obviously I'm not drinking at this point. I was like, I can't, like, this is not working for me, and I want to start my own business. And being the husband he is, he was like, okay, I'm not really maybe thinking it was really going to turn into anything. But somebody I had worked with who was a freelancer in web design, and this was kind of still new. I mean, Web 2.0 was like this crazy thing, like blogs and all of that. But we had worked together on some projects, and I really liked the creativity of it. So I was like, let's start a business together. And he was like, what? I have a steady job. This is just my side gig. And so we lined up some contracts. He quit his job, I quit mine, and it was 2008 when we started, and took this big leap of faith. Didn't have paychecks for a while just because, we're starting a business and we're, trying to get things going. And we did it so abruptly that we had to put that money back into the business. But it has been, I think it was 2008. So what is that, 12 years, 11 years? Yeah. So it's just been this totally worth it adventure that I wouldn't take back for anything. And blood, sweat, tears, all of that just made it so much sweeter. And it all, obviously, to make it this long in a business like web design is where we started, we had to evolve with the times. So social media started happening, digital marketing started happening. So we had to learn to evolve with that. And so I think that was how we were able to succeed and make it to where we are.
Yeah. We've talked a couple of times on the podcast about just how to know when you're ready to pivot. I think everyone's journey is so unique, but there's a lot to be said about paying attention to what you were saying. Like, when you know that the way you're showing up in your life, like with the people you love most, is being impacted by the fact that you don't love what you're doing. That's definitely something to pay attention to. And would you say for you that was like one of the biggest signs that you were really ready to make the leap?
100%, because like I said, I was pregnant. And so even my doctor's appointments were kind of like frowned upon if I had to leave and go to the doctor. And I'm like, oh my gosh, what happens when my kid gets sick at school or, something like that, and I have to leave? Then what kind of flack am I going to get? So I just felt like it was just not aligning with the kind of life I wanted to have and the freedom I wanted to have in my life. And maybe I'm just not a good employee because I like to have so much freedom. So there is that too. I probably wasn't ideal in that sense, but I think that's a quality of somebody like who wants to do bigger things. They kind of, want to have a little freedom and space to do that. So I needed that.
Oh, girl, I can understand that so well. And it was actually like around the same time that I ended up like fully launching into my business. And I remember just thinking to myself, like, it's the worst time, but also the best time. And I think that oftentimes we can't choose, like we don't choose when that nudge really gets a hold of us. And obviously it turned out well for you. And talking about pivots, you were delivered one of the pivots that a lot of us do encounter in life, which is the unintentional ones, or when life decides that there is another way things are going to go. So share the story about what happened and just how that affected this trajectory that you were on.
Oh, it's so crazy. So 4 years ago, we have a staff and we have this thriving business and everything in life is just like, oh, this is what we've been waiting for. And I have this minor thing, this heart ablation, and everything's good. It's not a big deal. For some AFib that I had, it was apparently hereditary. So, we're just kind of taking it in stride until I got this major migraine after my little in outpatient surgery. And they were like, well, let's do a CT scan because if we're doing any kind of procedure that has to do with your heart, there could be a chance that maybe a blood clot could have gone to your brain. And I know you're not presenting like you're having a stroke, but you might be having a stroke. And I was like, what?
Excuse
me? Yeah. So we do the CT scan and the doctor comes back and he says, well, we saw something. And I was like, what? And they were like, we don't know what we are seeing though. So we're going to have to run some more tests. And then long story short, this hospital wasn't really equipped to help me figure out what this light was. So we ended up somewhere where they presented to me that I had cancer, brain cancer, and not just brain cancer, but inoperable brain cancer. So I was just completely blindsided by this. I don't know why this whole time I've been poked and prodded and scanned after scanned. I was just thinking like, they're just got to figure this out. I don't, it's probably they overdo things just so that they know better and they have all the answers for you. So I get this diagnosis and immediately I'm thinking like, well, I have these two little kids and they need me. Am I going to be able to raise my kids? And there was a doctor, well, there was like 5 doctors in the room when they delivered this news. And I think it was a teaching moment for some younger doctors because one of the doctors in the room actually started crying when I asked that question. And so I realized that this was a serious thing, that I was actually, I actually had brain cancer, and that it's a big, scary diagnosis that doesn't have any promise of how long you get to be here. Yeah. So, and inoperable was just kind of like that icing on the cake, like, well, you're here, but we don't know what we're going to do with you yet. Yeah. So it took some soul searching for sure.
Which, I mean, to even put this into perspective, you were, healthy, right? Or so we think, right? Healthy in your early 30s, mom of 2 young kids, growing business. It's one of those things that I'm sure was even hard to hear and actually let sink in, because that's not at all the way that we think our life is going to go. And there was so much in your book, which we're going to talk about that later. We're going to stay here on this story because there's actually so much for all of us to gain from looking at these situations in life that we don't get to choose, but that test who we are and how we look at the world. And one of the things that I actually loved most when I read your book and hearing your story is you didn't take no for an answer. You didn't take inoperable for an answer. So share what you did next and kind of bring us to the place that you are now in your story, because that in itself has been miraculous.
Oh, so yeah, it was quite some news that I needed to digest. So we left the hospital and we actually went on vacation because it was already scheduled. And you would think that this might be a doom and gloom kind of, oh man, we have to go back home after this and figure out, how I'm going to stay alive. But it actually put my whole life into perspective, because all of a sudden I saw what a gift I had, that I had an able body at this moment, even though I was technically sick. Like I could walk around, I could play, I could laugh with my kids, I went surfing. Everything was just like extra sweet because I could see that my life had, and I had loved ones and so many things to be grateful for. I just wanted to soak up every second of it. instead of, I wasn't distracted by the work I had to do or the to-do list or what was waiting for me at home. I was just all of a sudden, for the first time, learning how to be in the moment and be in the story that is my life. Yeah. So with that step back, I was able to kind of find some clarity. And my mother, I was kind of in that whole like land of let's just live in the moment. And she was like, Andy, I'm going to do some research. And I did research and I found this doctor and I think he can help us. And I was like, no, I don't know. I mean, maybe not. Maybe let's just see how this goes. And she was like, no, we've got to see this guy. So I was like, okay, we'll see him. And I kind of didn't think it was real. I don't know. I was just in such this state of trying to absorb everything that some person could change this story that I was trying to wrap my head around just seemed so crazy. But then I met this doctor and I talked to him and he was real and he had a real solution. And he is Dr. Sinai at Barrow and was able to, he told me, he's like, I looked at your scans and I understand that you were told that it was inoperable, but I know that I can operate. And I was like, oh, great, we can get some of it when he said that. And then he finished, he's like, and I can get it all. And I was just like, what? You just changed my life. Because, and of course, I didn't know what was going to follow or if that was really going to happen. And I knew it was a risky surgery. But as soon as I heard that there was a chance, I was like, let's do it. I'm in. My whole self, my gut, my heart was just knew that this had to happen. Yeah. And so we made our arrangements and went from there.
And he was able to operate and he was able to get it all in that surgery, which didn't, of course, mean that your recovery was in a smooth road, an easy road. Right. But I love what you share in the book. The book is actually all about perspective. And the book is called New Again, Healing Through Perspective, which I love. And I think the part that I love that you've taken your experience and really used it as a platform to impact others is whether or not we've ever been on the receiving end of a diagnosis or another life-altering announcement or a life-altering occurrence, that we all have things that happen to us that give us the choice to take that on as our identity or not. So share a little bit about what you learned through that process and what it meant for you, but really what you want others to learn as well.
Yeah, so he did. He removed the whole tumor. I woke up in complete euphoria that I made it out and that I had all my skills because I tested them right away. And then it was this great, amazing, like almost rebirth in that moment. But at the same time, as it all started to sink in, and I actually had to go back for a second surgery, brain surgery, because I had a surgical infection. And come to find out, that's pretty dangerous too on your brain. So, and what the procedure is, and I think I didn't really know what I was getting into when this was happening. I'm thinking a brain tumor is like this tumor that they're going to take off my brain or something like that. Where in actuality, a brain tumor that's cancerous is your brain tissue that has changed and turned into cancer. So they're actually removing part of your brain. And when I saw my first scan with a hole in my brain, it was very shocking to me. It made me feel like Hannibal Lecter situation. I don't know. It was just like, this is so like, I'm not whole anymore. Like someone took a piece of who I am and who, like what I am. And so I felt like the sense of damage. And because that happened, I also had seizures because now there's this hole in my brain that's not allowing it to do everything it needs to do. So I had the seizures and I have a giant dent. Luckily I have long hair, but I have a giant dent in my head and I had this big scar that goes from the top of my head to behind my ear. And I had this debilitating anxiety that kind of comes with realizing that you have, you know, you have this, all of this stuff that's kind of wrong with you. And the statistics telling you that even somebody my age with a full resection, the likelihood of your cancer coming back and killing you within 10 years is like 2/3. And I'm like, what? That's 10 years? I mean, I guess that's better than nothing, but you're still thinking like, I thought I was going to be able to raise my kids. And the more you learn about this stuff, it's just like, you just feel like, what's the point? Why did God take me this far? And then, I had all this hope, and then all of a sudden I don't. And I just felt completely damaged for everything that I went through. But I also started, having support of friends and family and people who urged me to go to therapy, which I was like, they're just going to pull out all the things I've already organized and I already figured out, and they're going to make it worse. But in reality, I think having someone to talk to really helps me realize that everything that I had been going through I was learning from it, and I was growing and evolving, and I was actually becoming something better than I was before, because I was building upon what I was. Yeah. And I was more equipped for my life than I was before. I think I was more focused on things that weren't really like important. I hate to say that, but they weren't big picture things. Mm-hmm. And so having that experience gave me a sense of gratitude that I didn't have before, and wherewithal to get through some pretty hard stuff. And I feel like anybody who's been through a traumatic experience or has been given some kind of label for something that they went through or that has happened to them, or that they've maybe given themselves just by feedback that they've received from somebody, and that all just kind of wears on us over time. And I feel like those almost are our superpowers, because once we have that and we know like how to harness all of that stuff that we have perspective beyond what other people, can't even dream about. And we can do really hard things because we have done really hard things. Yeah. So for me to kind of realize that gave me almost my life back, if that even makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it's so easy. And I even think about my life and the things that I so easily take for granted that I'm able to do, or the things that I stress out about that like you said, aren't part of the bigger picture, or, it just has you look at life through a different lens. And one of the parts that I could really identify with, having not even been through the exact same situation, was you talked about, and this is so my personality too, but you talked about having this feeling of like, okay, like when am I going to be back to myself? Mm-hmm. But realizing that you were actually new. You were actually a different person on the other side of this experience. What was the biggest lesson within all of that?
Yeah, so that didn't work. I realized, so I thought, my first thought was, okay, I'm going to recover. I'm going to get through this, and all of these mental battles I'm having, these physical battles I'm having, by just trying to be the old me and do all the things old Andy did, go back to work and go back to the gym and do all the things around the house and mom. And I was overwhelmed by it, because I wasn't the same person, if that makes sense. I had kind of grown from that. And so when I tried to push myself into those boxes, I didn't fit anymore. And I had to kind of learn how to evolve as a person so that I could step into those roles, but in a new way that I think was more serving, and it was better for business. It was better for momming. It was better for me being a wife. I just feel like everything taught me that, that old box that I used to fit in was not my size anymore. And I needed to kind of create a new place for myself in all of those roles.
Yeah. Oh gosh, I can just so relate to that, to the evolution that comes through the experiences we have in life, whether traumatic or not, but also feeling like there's almost a mourning period for the old us.
Mm-hmm.
And whether that's
Yes.
if you've gone through personal growth, there've been a lot of times that I've actually had to pause and like mourn the old me or old relationships or old habits that couldn't come with in this
Mm-hmm.
next phase that I was growing into. And
Yes.
I saw so much of that in your story too. Um, and I loved the part, which I'd love for you to touch on next, about having to learn to accept help. Can you talk
Mm.
about that? Because I think
Yeah.
this is something I'm just going to like get my pen out and be taking notes during this because that's such a struggle for a lot of women, especially women
Mm-hmm.
chasing big dreams,
Yeah.
is being having to learn newly to
Mm-hmm.
actually accept help. So what was that like for you?
It was so hard because I do it myself, and I it I would have done it myself. I would have done everything myself if I didn't have like physical limitations at first. And I think, well, the first thing was after surgery, my left hand didn't work right. So my brain was swollen, and that kind of was contributing to not being able to use my hand. And so I couldn't tie my shoes, and I couldn't cut
Mm,
my food and tie my pajama pants or whatever. And so I had to accept my husband's help for stuff like that. And I know that seems small, but when you can't do the small things, it's for someone like me who's like a doer, like I call myself,
yeah.
it is the worst because you have to ask for help. Otherwise it just doesn't happen. You can't put your shoes on that you want to wear.
Yeah.
So he would do those things and I would cry through it and he would talk me through it. And it helped us when people wanted to help us on a bigger level and bring us meals or help clean the
Mhm.
house. And I was like, no, we can do that. And you're not gonna, one of my dear friends, she came over and cleaned my toilets. And I was like, no, I have two little boys. This is not happening. But she came over anyways. And she's like, nope, it's okay. And she pretty much kicked us out when she got there. And we went on a little date that day. And I was like, wow, this is really nice, to have this time together and to let somebody do something that they want to do.
Yeah.
So realizing that she was a lot like me in the fact that she wanted to do something, and that's her way of showing love and showing, what she can contribute, letting her bring what she can contribute to the table, not only helped me, but it helped her. And when people were bringing us food, we were like, this is not only a time for us to have a meal, but it's a time to have this community and grow our friendships in ways that, and relationships in ways that we wouldn't have otherwise. So, kind of learning that there's two sides to the coin of accepting help, but looking at it from a way of like also letting that person do the thing that they want to do because it's beneficial on both ends.
Yeah, and I love that. I'm like nodding along as you're saying all of the above because that's been a huge part of my own journey. And obviously you have the perspective as a business owner too. What do you
Mhm.
feel like people can learn from this idea of accepting help in a business sense? Like what could that offer us as we're growing businesses or passion projects and making a bigger
Mhm.
impact?
The same thing it offered me, in that situation is that we get to release some of that overwhelm
Yeah.
because we have so much that is on our plate. And as a business owner, the things that we're worried about, the things that we're dealing with are not, I mean, the important things, the big things are beyond the tactical level. Just like in life, it's like the laundry isn't as important as, kissing my kids goodnight.
Yeah.
So there's the overarching things that as a business owner, we really have to focus on. So some of the more tactical things that could just be, you know, kind of a time suck and things that don't really use our gifts as a business owner to grow our business into something really great. That should be something reserved for someone who maybe is growing up in this space themselves and they really want to learn these things And so it's that give and take again. So that person who you're allowing in to help you with something that you see as small could be a big opportunity for them. So it's not just like, I'm getting, some intern on the cheap to do this for me. It's like, well, this person may have a future in this and they're willing to do anything that they can, and I'm going to let them, and we're both going to succeed.
Yeah, I think that I should probably take this little clip and just replay it over and over and over for myself and so many people that I know, because it's oftentimes when we're building something and it feels like it's our baby, that's the hardest place to allow others to contribute and to serve. And it makes all the difference when we start to let some of that go. I know I'm having my own process with that. But hearing from other people who've gone before and who've built companies has been a huge, huge help, because I've seen the benefits now on the other side of allowing others to contribute to a vision. And I love that. I think the parallels between, like, in our personal life, allowing others to contribute, and then to our businesses is like uncanny. And probably something we'll never stop talking about on this show, because I know that I'm not the only one, you're not the only one who's ever struggled with that. But why do you think it is so hard for us as women? I think it's especially hard for women to allow help. But what do you think that is?
I think and maybe it's just the tendencies of anyone who owns a business, that type A driven personality of like, I got this and I want to see this through because it'll be the most fulfilling. And I'm probably, since I came up with this, I'm probably the only one who can do it right. So
guilty.
So that is not true, because there's so many things. Like, people sometimes will mention something that has to do with something that doesn't have to do with my business or whatever might be on my plate. And then I'm like, that would be a really good addition or compliment to what I'm doing, but in a business way. So there's ideas, if you just let people, give you some of their feedback and some of their perspective, you can grow and elaborate on even the best idea, and you can make it even better if we just kind of come together and have an open mind about what could be if we did this or that, and not shut stuff down so quickly just because it isn't our own idea.
And thank you so much for being willing to share that struggle that you went through to accept help, because I think when we share those stories and the things that we all are learning in the process, that's where others get to see for themselves where there's opportunity for growth. And so it's one of the reasons why I'm so grateful that you wrote your story in the form of a book. And I want to hear a little bit about what that process was like, because you were sharing a very, very personal experience and some of the emotions, like the really personal emotions you went through. What inspired you to write the book in the first place? And then just what was that experience like?
Crazy. So I never told you this, but I know you're friends with Lori, and I was reading her book with my tribe when it came out, her published. And it was one of the questions in our discussions was like something along the lines of, what would you do if you could do anything? And when it was my turn, I was like, well, I would write a book. And they were like, well, but you can do that. And I'm like, no, I can't. People can't know all my stuff. And so my little tribe, they pushed me and they said, you just have to write and then just start there and see where it takes you. And if anyone's going to tell your story, it might as well be you. And then you can have your own stamp on it, and you can tell it your way, because there's going to be other people like your mom or your husband who have their perspectives. But for example, I wanted my kids to know some certain things and certain, from my perspective, about what I went through as a mom, and saw things that they went through. And I wanted to share the story because I overarchingly wanted them to know that if they went through something that was really, really hard, that you can make it out on the other side. It is possible, and you don't have to give up, because there's more to your story than whatever might seem like might end it. So I really wanted to write it for them. And that's really kind of how it started out, was like, maybe it'll just be this journal thing that I do for my kids. And then as I started going and writing, it just started flowing. And then I started thinking about other people that might be reading it. And I was like, well, we've all been through stuff. And I included some things in the book, like my sexual abuse and the problems I had with my dad who went MIA. And because I realized that those all came up in therapy when I was dealing with, how to handle my life, and kind of sort through some things. And I realized my story is really similar to a lot of other people's stories. And maybe someone who's reading this, they will get something out of it, whether or not they've had cancer or some kind of medical or life altering thing, that they can find some sort of renewal in themselves, just like I did, just by seeing that I could do it. Because I think I watched a few videos, I saw them on social media, of like people who had gone through these crazy things, and I'm just watching, like, they're smiling. Like when I was going through this, like, how did they get back to happy? I am in the pits right now. And so seeing them just in those short little like social media clips that I saw, I don't know, Facebook was telling me something at the time, like, if they can smile again after what they've been through, then I can too. And I've got to figure this out. And so I did. And I wanted to give that to my kids in case Facebook didn't bless them with these inspirational videos. Like
who knows?
Or whatever it will be by then.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I wanted to let them know that was possible. And it just kind of evolved from there. And I just gave it over. And I said, God, this is my story, but this is your story. So what I write down, I trust, is what you want, not just my kids, but other women or people to know that are going through something that they don't feel like they're going to make it out of, because they will, because they're reading it. They got here. They made it to today. So that was the overarching why as to why I did it.
Which, I can like relate to so much of that, and just like the surrender piece of trusting that what words come out, someone somewhere needs to hear.
Yes.
I also know that the process changes you, and it teaches you all new things about yourself and really what you're even capable of. What was the biggest lesson on the other side of writing the book and finishing it and now publishing it? And what do you now see about yourself that maybe you didn't before?
Oh my gosh. I really thought that I would launch it and that my family would buy it to be nice, and that I would have some copies for, my keepsakes. And for some reason, it just kind of blew up. The very first day I got the #1 new release for Amazon. And it was just a random day, and I didn't do a ton of promoting up to it, just with like my little core group. And it was all word of mouth, and it's been word of mouth ever since. And I put my contact information at the end of the book because I wanted people to be able to reach out to me. And I've had the most amazing conversations with people on the other side of the US, in New Zealand, and all these crazy places. And I'm like encouraged to the point where I feel like I'm at a loss almost, because I know that the book is important, but there's something else. And I've been talking to you about this. I don't know what that is, but there's something next, and people they're receiving the book and they're making changes and they're inspired. But I'm not sure like what that looks like next for them. So when I figure that out and when I talk to people, I want to do that next step thing. And I never expected it to be anything more than just a little book. But I have people who I am building relationships with, and I never expected that to come with it. I've been with people who it's their scan day and they're calling me or messaging me saying, it's my scan day, will you pray for me? And then they text me back and they're like, it's good, we're stable. And so I'm cheering with them and I'm like in their stories with them too. And I would have never met these people otherwise. So I just feel that impact and that encouragement that I get from everyone who messages me or emails me after they read it. That just kind of gives me that extra little nudge to keep going with this and not just let it be what it is. So we'll see what this turns into. But I learned that when you open yourself up, then you're open and there's things that are going to come your way and you just have to be open to that and see what happens.
I literally had chills like 3 times just even listening to you share that. And I think I was actually sharing about this on social media this week because I think back to even being at that point and not even really understanding the full picture of what something was going to turn into, but how much I prevented myself from making a difference or even stepping into opportunities because I wanted to wait until I knew. I wanted to wait until I could see the plan. But the best things have come from stepping into the thing that I can't deny I feel like I'm supposed to do. And like for you, like you described, just feeling like you wanted to write the book.
Yeah.
And now knowing that whatever comes next is probably going to be beyond what your mind could even fathom. And that's actually, I think, where the full like joy and fulfillment and purpose started for me.
Yeah.
So it's been really fun watching, you and so many other women in our community being at that point and like being so excited to see what this looks like a year from now, 5 years from now. I mean, who knows?
Who knows? I just hope a lot of people find that healing perspective and they find that, they can be beyond what they feel damaged by.
Yeah.
So as many people that can feel that as possible, and any way I can help them do that, I'm open to it.
So where can people find the book if they want a copy? And you all do want a copy.
Yes, it's on Amazon. New Again, Healing Through Perspective. It's also on my website. I have signed copies at andythenewgirl.com. And Andy the New Girl is my handle on everything. So that's on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter.
And I will make sure that we link all of this so that people can easily find you. I know your social media account specifically is one that I turn to when I do just need like that little reminder that I can do hard things or that, the hard things that happen to me don't define me. So I highly recommend connect, follow, cyberstalk. In a polite way, but definitely grab a copy of the book, grab some for your friends because it's such an easy read. I think I read it in 2 days. I told you it was something like that, 2, maybe 3 max. And it was full of so much wisdom, like wisdom in not the obvious ways where you're saying like, let me tell you how to transform your life. It would be the simplest thing that you would say. And I would spend like the next full day thinking about it, thinking about how maybe it was a blind spot, like for me, not realizing how much I let certain things define me or anyway, I could go on and on and on. You guys just need to grab a copy of the book. And I want to end on one last question. This is one that we end with often. And kind of tailor it to the experience that you've had. We always ask, if you had one message that you could share with the women in the Powerhouse community. I mean, you've been at the event, you know the vibe, you know what we're all about. But I would love if you would speak specifically to those who maybe are listening to this and realize they've let something define them. They've let that hard thing or that traumatic experience define them. What do you want them to know specifically? From your story and your experience?
So I think just pinpointing, what that thing is and defining, first of all, what that trauma is. And I know I say trauma like it's a big thing, but it can be little things that kind of add up over time or something that all of a sudden made you feel differently about yourself. Whatever that is, in any way, shape, or form, what have you learned from it? And then also defining that. What have I learned from it? And then once you know what you've learned from it, how can you take what you've learned and use it for good? Because I like to say, and maybe this is short-sighted, but I'm always like, if I can't bring good out of what I've been through, then it was all for nothing. And I know there's other reasons that it was probably, that it happened. But for me, like, I want it to be for something. So if it was hard and it was awful and it's something I don't, even like the sexual abuse stuff, that was a really dark time, to be a teenager and then to get married. And this follows you your whole life, But when you can change your story and turn it into something that you can use for good, then it makes whatever hard thing that you have to do 100%, 1,000% worth it. So that's my biggest takeaway. Use it for good.
I love that so much. And I appreciate you. You've just been such a light in my life. And I'm grateful for our friendship. Grateful to have you as part of my girl gang. And I appreciate you being here.
Thank you so much for having me.